love to welcome to the stage our speaker for today, Anne Friedman.
Hi. Is everyone shaking from coffee and cold brew? I was telling my friends I'm gonna have 2 donuts and 2 cold brews, and I made it halfway through a cold brew, and I was like, I can't speak if I have more of this. It is drugs. Anyway, I know that Lindsay gave a little bit of my bio earlier today, but I'm gonna do a real quick, this is what I do. It is Creative Mornings. I kind of was like, I'm gonna list all the things I do that are like in the realm of the creative. So real quick, okay, I write this column for New York Magazine's website. I write an opinion column less frequently for our illustrious local paper. I contribute to every issue of The Gentlewoman, which is a great women's magazine that puts people on the cover who are not exclusively young, skinny white women, although this does happen to be a young, skinny white woman. I just want to point that out. I write for a lot of other places. I do this email newsletter every Friday that I have to finish as soon as we're done with this. I co-host this podcast. I make these pie charts, which appear in the newsletter. I read books. I make these weird stoner collages for my friend. I make really good deviled eggs. I've been saying for the past 8 years that I want to write a book. Still haven't figured out what I want to write a book about. Do I really want to write a book? I don't know. Maybe that's not my most effective medium. I mean, really, maybe I'm just scared. This seems really hard. Books, we've all read a lot of mediocre books. Anyway, whatever. So I have the creative drama. I'm also a really good editor. That was the job I had for many years before I did all of this stuff as a freelancer. And so I'm sure there are things that are potentially creatively taboo about actually doing this work. I just wanted to show those emoji eyes again. But really when I think about what this word means in the context of my work, almost none of it has to do with the actual creative part. Really it has to do with all of the other stuff that surrounds that. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But first, because one of my most important creative tools is the dictionary, let's define what we're really talking about here. Basically means if something is taboo, it is banned on grounds of morality. This is Merriam-Webster talking. Banned as constituting a risk, or forbidden because of what are held to be dangerous supernatural powers. Again, editing. Basically, it's something that's perceived as immoral, something that's perceived as too risky, something that might be magical, so magical it's dangerous. In the context of my own work and career, there are a lot of things that maybe seem like they're taboo or risky or but are in fact 100% safe and acceptable for people in my position to do, especially if, like me, you are white and heterosexual. So let's just run through real quick what is not taboo. Writing confessional personal essays, especially if they're about your sex life or relationships, not taboo. Declaring you're not a feminist, maybe even writing a book about it, not taboo. Declaring actually you're totally a feminist because feminism is super sexy, not taboo. Instagramming yourself at the Antelope Valley Poppy Bloom in the middle of the workday. When it's easier to crop out the hordes of other people. Full disclosure, I don't know if any of these women are actually writers. Also, this has nothing to do with my talk. I just wanted to complain about this microtrend. For the record, most of my work days do not take place in a field of poppies. They sort of look like this. But I do really love my job, and I do make a decent living as a freelance writer, which historically is a career only undertaken by the independently wealthy or extremely foolish. And I'm definitely not the former, so you can decide for yourself if I'm the latter. But yeah, so let's talk about things that I think are actually frowned upon, or I'm going to talk about things that are frowned upon, I think, in my line of work, things that meet that definition of taboo. And the first one is obviously money, right? This is one of those things that I think that I actually have responded to emails about money with this exact gift, so it's very relevant. this is one of those things where everybody knows, like, I think there's probably a good percentage in this of people in this room who are regularly paid for creative work. And I think it's taboo for a few reasons. I mean, one, like the idea that you're doing work that you love, that's fulfilling, it's an outlet for you. So really talking about how money intersects with that is like somehow sullying the process or bringing it down to earth or, I don't know. And I think that feeling, that kind of taboo, that aspect of it really comes up, especially when you're asking for more money for your work. I always ask for more money. Like I said, I'm like employed full-time as a freelance writer. So the great and terrible thing about that is that I negotiate my annual salary in tiny increments every week or every couple of weeks. So what does it look like to ask for more money? Here are some email excerpts. I use my knowledge of what someone has paid me in the past or what they've paid other people as leverage. So here's an email. I don't know how well you can read this, but basically I'm like, hey, last time you paid me $1 a word. Why are you offering me less? Confused. That's one way to respond. Sometimes I just say straight up, I can't do it for such a low rate. This is someone offering me 40p a word. We are post-Brexit. I can look at currency conversion. That might have flown like a year and a half ago, but like now I'm like, you're gonna have to double that. I know. Anyway, so I straight up say that's too low. I can't work for that. And these are both success stories, both situations where editors gave me the amount I was asking for. And then here, when I'm really scared to ask, I bury it in a multi-point list. So I blurred out a lot of the other points because they're like not actually relevant. But you'll see there, bullet 3 out of like, I think it's the third of 3, but then it's sandwiched in more text to just pad out the ask. This is me asking for a raise on one of my like recurring columns, which is actually really important for me financially. There are things I do week after week, and I don't negotiate week after week. I negotiate like a rate that is just set. And so here, shamefully, is me being like, I haven't asked for a raise since 2012. This is an email I sent it early last year. I mean, anyway, so not saying I'm always good at this, but if you're really scared, burying it in a bullet point like list can really help. I also have gotten in a good habit of asking for money for things that I don't want to do, even if people don't think it should be compensated. It's not just a trend article. I mean, I pulled this conveniently from the New York Post, which who even reads that for stuff like this? But anyway, I ask for money when someone has requested my time, but I don't really see a reason to donate that to them. I don't usually ask me to donate my time. They don't really phrase it that way, but so I put this page on my website that like claims I'm a consultant, which is just a lie. It's just, this is a link for me to send to someone who I'm not interested in talking to. Usually that means it's like someone, one strain of email I get a lot is a guy who's like, I read an article that you wrote in the beginning of 2013, and now I'm starting a company that's gonna like do something you identified as a problem. Can I get on the phone with you and will you try it out and will you tell me what you think? I'm like, no, that's a job. And then I just made up a consulting rate. I'm like, my time costs $200 an hour if you want me to consult on your startup. And usually, I mean, I will say that this like networking over coffee thing is like a little bit, that's not exactly how I use this, although depending on who's asking, sometimes I will send them this link. I do answer emails from like up-and-coming journalists or like colleagues, people who have like a specific direct question. I mean, those are things that I don't mind doing for free. But there's a lot of stuff that I find having this page on my website has really helped me to say, this is something you should be paying me for. Anyway, so then the other thing about the money conversation is I think my profession and most creative professions would be straight up more equitable if everyone were willing to talk about what they earned. And among freelance writers, there's the few efforts to do that. There's a website called Who Pays Writers where people can log what rate they receive for what type of work and from whom, which is all well and good, but there's a pretty big range. I mean, you see pretty quickly that when I look up places where I write for, it's like, oh, I received way less than that or way more than that. You really learn that if you haven't already been an editor to learn this from the other side, there's a huge range in who gets paid to do the same work. And so I think that we can kind of see some patterns emerge if people would talk about this more, like, all of my friends who kind of fit this demographic category are making this, and then these people are making that. And so this is one of those taboos. I think if everyone broke together, it could be truly revolutionary. So I will sort of break it today. I have this spreadsheet. I don't know if you can actually read it. I thought this was going to be a big taboo thing, but maybe it's too small to be taboo. So I know, right? So this is how I track like what's happening with all of my money. It's a thing I adapted from when I was an editor, and I used to have to track a lot of assignments to different writers. But essentially, like when I have work, it moves down through these categories. So the very first one is stuff that I've pitched that may or may not be greenlit. The second one is things that I'm in contract to do, I'm still working on. The third thing is I filed the work, I've sent it off, but I haven't invoiced yet. That's always the smallest category, I'm quick to invoice. And then the bottom one is I've invoiced but haven't been paid yet. Always the biggest category. It just gets fatter as you move down. So anyway, and I think that, when I look at like, this is nice for me because it's like the pipeline of my work, like what money is coming in and when, and like that number of like what is sent out, what is invoiced but hasn't been paid yet is sort of like how I know, okay, maybe you need to do some more work to put it in that pipeline, or maybe I'm okay to kind of, God, I'm gonna do that again. I'm just gonna set it down. I talk with my hands a lot. So maybe I can just chill out and not pitch so hard. Anyway, and there are things that, like, there's a huge range of things, right? Like, I was paid a ludicrous amount of money to speak to, like, a women's business conference, like, in January, that is, like, gonna compensate for the fact that I was paid 30 cents a word to write an essay for a publication I really love that I've been wanting to write, and I wanted to work with that specific editor. And so, I can spend 4 days writing an essay that's not even going to come close to compensating me for 4 days of work, because I got paid essentially 4 days worth of salary to speak to a room of business ladies. And I think that these are calculations we all make, but being okay with saying, and I do try to one-on-one, if someone emails me and is like, hey, what do you get from this publication? I always tell people one-on-one, but I always toy with the idea. I'm like, when I tweet an article that I've written, should I say, this paid me $1,000 for 4 days of work? Should I say that? I don't know. I think that in some ways I don't want to like attach a dollar sign to everything we do, but when I think about the business side of our work, I think it could do a lot of good. Anyway, here's what I earned to be here today. When you think like, it probably took me like a good better part of a day with a lot of messing around doing other things on the internet to put this talk together. I know everyone here is a volunteer, I'm not trying to but anyway, maybe I should also every time I speak be like, here's what they're paying me to be here. Because if you follow anything that has to do with speakers' rates, you'll know that some people get paid and some people don't. Even at the same conference, it's not guaranteed that even if you've been told there's no budget for speakers, sometimes there really is, and it's just not a budget for you. So anyway, always ask your other speakers what they're making. Anyway, money. I think we're told that this is a taboo topic because it's like too risky. I have had editors say to me directly, usually when I ask for more, I can do this for you, but don't mention it to other writers, because if you told them, I can't afford to pay everyone this rate that I'm paying you. This is a thing that's been told to me directly many, many times. To me, that's a real sign actually talking about this is so magical, it's dangerous, and truly it fits into that as opposed to being too risky. Too risky for whom is the question that I ask. Okay. Sorry, I tried to write this in 20 minutes, but I'm really interested in this topic, so I'm a little long-winded. Okay, refusing to be complicit is a taboo. Like, honestly, to varying degrees, everyone here has participated in projects that do not match up with our professed values in some way. And maybe that means, like, creatively, like, oh God, I just, greenlit this piece of, like, art or this logo or whatever that I actually think is, like, not great, but we just have to keep moving, to this challenges core values about my politics and about, like, how I believe the world should work. I would argue it is very taboo to challenge core assumptions that are made by people who are paying me or promoting my work. Here's the easiest example. Confession, sometimes I still write for women's magazines. It's a habit I've been trying to kick for years. But speaking of the money piece, it can be really hard when they dangle this rate that looks really good, like $2 a word, in front of me. And when I first started out as a freelancer, I used to tell myself I could write really good and interesting things that would appear inside this packaging, and it would be worth it. Like they do reach a lot of people, and I could get over the things that I don't agree with, in terms of like being not just like politically, but just being so bored by this, like just being like creatively, this is bad, and I don't know. And that's like, it was a good thing for me to tell myself when I was just starting as a freelancer, and I really needed money from places like this. So you break the taboos you have to break, really. But this is a thing that a women's magazine editor actually said to me once. She said this in 2013. And when I heard those words, I was like, wow, one of the things that I really find most, like all the writing I love most in the world, like fits some sort of version of like, it's nuanced and interesting and complicated. And here I'm working with someone who's telling me, just forget a thing that you think makes writing amazing. Or like in the highest version of your work, this is what you do, and I'm telling you to forget it. So yeah, 2013, it took me another 2 years to get financially stable enough to say no, that when these editors asked me to write really boring profiles of models or like truly dumb essays, I could say no. And so, in terms of like refusing to be complicit, it's interesting because I think for a while I just said, no, I'm too busy, or kind of lied. We know we say no for all kinds of reasons, but I think it's pretty taboo to be like, no, your ideas are bad. Like, I don't want to be a part of this project because it conflicts with core values I have. But like I said, I eventually got to a point where I was like, okay, I think I could actually be a little bit more honest about why I don't want to do this work. So I stopped holding my tongue a little bit. This was an email I got in 2015 saying, Anne, do you want to write some cover stories for Glamour? And so I wrote this, again, bulleted list, you're seeing a pattern, but was sort of like, okay, well, like, in what world would I want to write for you? And the answer is, sorry, it's very small on my screen, but basically, like, I care about this person as an agent, like as someone who is an actor in the world, not in the, like, on screen, but like, doing cool, interesting things is not just a vessel for other people's ideas or posing, someone who has some amount of control. I'm really interested in having access to that person, so it's not like, you've ever read those celebrity profiles where it's like, Jack Nicholson tears into a hamburger, and it's like, or whatever, it's like trying to find real meaning in like just having lunch with someone. It's how like the whole MIA truffle fries story happened, because there's not that much you can learn from one lunch with someone. So I was like, I want more time than a lunch, which also, that means whoever you're interviewing actually cares and wants to be a part of it. I mean, anyone will turn up for an hour and be like, sure, write about me. But if they're gonna give you more time than that, beyond the lunch, usually they wanna be there too. That's important for me. And then finally, like I said, so bored by those covers, I'm like, listen, if you're gonna put someone on your cover who is not young, skinny, straight, and white, call me. Would love to talk to that person. I would love to support the effort of putting them on the cover of Glamour. I did not receive a reply to this email. Although when I searched my inbox to find it, to screenshot it to show you today, I realized she had emailed me about some other specific assignment that I turned down in a much more like just said no and didn't illuminate reasons. So it's not like I'm always sending these crusading emails trying to like change women's magazines, but occasionally I get like maybe like extra coffee day, Anyway, so here's one I sent this week. Someone asked me to interview Hailey Baldwin for LUK. And I was like, I thought about what to reply, and I just said, I'm just not very interested in Hailey Baldwin. I mean, like, what are you doing? Putting a model who's like the daughter of a lesser Baldwin brother, like on the cover of your magazine? Like, sorry. I mean, I don't know. And so like there is a way, also did not receive a reply to this email either. But truth be told, there is a part of me that wants to be like, oh my God, like when I think about the number of people who are doing interesting things that would merit the cover of LUK, and I'm like, this is the email you're sending me, this is who you want me to talk to. I mean, at a certain point, I know it's not my job, I'm not the editor of these places, but there is also an issue of complicity where I'm like, okay, I have not like a seat at the table, but I'm like maybe in the room. They call me in the room sometimes, and if they're gonna call me in the room, I wanna be able to say, I think you're making choices that are not good. I am not always good at this. Like, I think that being this person requires like not just thinking on a level of like what money do I need to make and what work I'm interested in, but this higher level too of like how does this fit into the world overall and my politics overall. Here in the fall, I definitely did not break this complicity taboo. I was asked to be on an NPR panel discussion about Hillary's campaign and gender. And it, like, you know, part of it was like it came during, it was like a busy week or whatever, and I was like, and they were like, one of the other guests is Jill Abramson, you know, who used to be the editor of the New York Times, and I was all, ooh, sure, I'll do it, exciting. And then I didn't really ask any questions about who else was part of this panel or who was part of this discussion. And then as they were introducing the guests the day that this was recording, I was like, oh shit, these are all like white women who are really demographically similar in other ways too. Oh, I'm about to be complicit in another conversation that conflates women with wealthy white woman who works in media. Oh, and it's just like, it was like one of those things, but it was already happening at that point. It was like, they were like, you know, Anne Friedman's joining us from Los Angeles, and this is like what's happening in my head. And so, you know, I mean, like, and it happened. I did it. Like, this was a thing that I was complicit in. So I'm also showing you this. It's not like just crusading behind the scenes emails. It was like, you know, I think it's pretty easy to like, whoops, I've ended up being part of a narrative that I don't think is great. So again, I think that it's often seen as too risky to speak up about this stuff, especially if you work for yourself. And I think that there are ways to do that privately and publicly. I really could have, if I'd been thinking about this harder, said to the NPR booker, like, I would love to do this if you book 2 more women who have a more interesting perspective or a more diverse perspective. I could have said, here are the emails of 6 other women I know who would be great for this conversation. And, you know, I would like to say I didn't do that because it was too risky, but like the truth is I was too lazy. And didn't, no, I mean, and I didn't think hard enough about it. But again, it's one of those things, if we were all thinking about like how to sort of say, no, I'm not going to be complicit in this thing I disagree with. Again, so magical, it's dangerous. You're seeing a pattern, I know. And finally, the third thing I'm going to talk about is owning your work. I think this is more taboo, probably for women and certain other folks. But in general, I think it's something I've heard people express discomfort over. How exactly do I tell the world the thing I'm working on without seeming like I'm full of myself or like I'm taking up too much space? Everyone can picture like the one person who's always in their feeds talking about and like hyping their work, and it's just like, I don't want to be that one person. I think we all have a few. Anyway, so here's my email newsletter, which I've been doing since 2013. And these days it has a lot of subscribers and it's kind of its own editorial product. But when I started it, it was much more of like targeted self-promotion, where I hoped that some of the editors who pay me would subscribe. And then even if they didn't end up, you know, replying to it with an assignment, they would see my name in their inbox and they would be like, oh, Anne, she exists. Like, maybe I should assign her something. I would just be like more in their world or in their mindset. So it was definitely purely self-promotion. Definitely did not look this pretty when I started it. But I did make a point of calling it the Anne Friedman Weekly because I had learned an important lesson about claiming things for myself. Let's go back, Wayne's World time thing, to 2004. This was the very first like writing for the internet gig I had. It was for a blog called Feministing. I started writing for it because I couldn't find anyone to hire me and pay me to do a journalism job. And the women who ran this site, who had just started it at that point, asked me to contribute. And I became part of the editorial collective that ran that site from 2004 to 2010. And so anyway, so yeah, we wrote collectively under this banner. And I think our first names, it might be cut off here, but our first names appeared like really small at the bottom of each post. Around the same time, men were doing also really ugly blogs, but their names were at the top. God, the internet in 2004 was dark, wasn't it? It was so bleak. Anyway, and so they had blogs where their names were at the top. Here's another one. And their photo. It was hard not to notice that the men who made these blogs actually, for probably lots of other reasons too, one of them being they're good at what they do, parlayed those into a series of increasingly high-profile journalism jobs. Now these two dudes run a site called Vox.com. I worked with them for several years. They're great people, but that does not detract from the lesson that maybe, this is sort of like a little thing that started to appear in the back of my mind, I don't know, maybe like 2008 to 2010, when I was like at the end of my run at Feministing. Maybe like something about their success is correlated to the fact that their just names and faces are right up there. And they were owning it from the start before anyone was really reading it. And I will note that most of us who worked on Feministing have also ended up in great places. So I'm not like, it's not like we're all here and they're here. But it took us longer. Here's a New Yorker article from 2008. This is right when I started to have my realization. Can you see it's highlighted? You might not be able to see it very well, but there's a quote in there from one blogger. That's me. And here I am honestly, being quoted in the New Yorker was probably one of my career highlights to this point. And I was quoted as one blogger, and it was devastating. I definitely cried about it. I was really upset. This appeared in print as well, not just online. That same year, here's another article on like the New Yorker's website, which quotes by name or mentions by name those two men who I was showing you their blogs, citing their full names. So anyway, that's why my name is in a really big ass font at the top of my newsletter. Yeah. I know, never thought I would get an applause for that one, right? I think I started this 5 years after that like New Yorker article ran. And I didn't, to be fair, I did not just learn this from blogger dudes of the early aughts. Martha taught me. Oprah taught me. P.S. You guys, have you seen the behind the scenes of this Oprah photo shoot? I had to include this internet gold. Please Google it. But anyway, so self-promotion, or like the idea of for some reason putting your name in a really big font at the top of something feels like the ultimate self-promotion. That and lounging against a stuffed lion and not having it detract from your brand at all. It's so good. But anyway, so when you look at the research on self-promotion, women are more scared that they're going to be perceived negatively for it, and they're less successful when they do it than men. So, there is good reason behind this being a taboo. But you know how RuPaul always says, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love someone else? Does anyone know that? Yeah, oh good, like a really affirmative murmur. Well, I feel like the equivalent here is if you can't promote yourself, how the hell are you going to ask someone else to promote you? You have to at least set a baseline of what you expect in terms of recognition for your own work. And if you don't feel good about doing it, the world can tell. Here's a really academic jargony quote, which essentially is if you're scared of a backlash, it prohibits, whatever, one of those two words, both of those two words, your success in self-promoting. In actual English, you're less effective. And so they did this study, so I feel a little bad citing this because most studies about women and ambition and success are conducted among 40 college freshmen. They're always, if you read the fine print of all studies about gender and work, and it's oh wow, this is a group of college freshmen who answered these questions. So skepticism. But they did this really interesting experiment around self-promotion where they took a group of people and they said, your assignment is to write an essay about your personal accomplishments. And then they split them in half. And half of them just were in a room like this, whatever. And the other half, they were told that there was a white noise generator in the room that they couldn't hear, but would make them feel uncomfortable as they were writing the essay. And the upshot was the people who were in the fake white noise room, obviously there was no white noise machine, I don't have to tell you that. The people who were in the fake white noise room ended up doing so much better because they thought their discomfort was due to the white noise machine and not being uncomfortable with touting their personal accomplishments. And anyway, were more successful at selling themselves, essentially. And so basically you have to believe it in order to sell it. And some people pretend that you can opt out of it altogether, but I don't think that's true. So get comfortable. Anyway, again, and I think that there is a perception that it's taboo, especially for women or other groups because it's too risky to self-promote in such a direct way in like 70-point font. But it's still pretty magical to get over that and do it right. These are taboos that I endorse breaking, especially if you're a woman, but like probably if you're anyone. And let's talk about it. You have questions?